industry has been able to step up and kind of fill that inventory gap with new construction. And so across the country, new construction represents about a third of the inventory that's for sale on the market today. In this market, we're about 7.5%. We can't step up and provide that inventory that we've seen the industry be able to do nationally. And of course, that is because the regulatory challenges that we're up against. I mean, it's the lack of available land, and especially the lack of available land that's flat and less costly to develop. And so what we've seen here in Salem in terms of lot prices is we're looking right now, lot prices are $180,000 to $200,000, bare dirt, right? So by the time you get a building permit and pay your SDCs, you're at $205,000 to $230,000 before you've bought a 2x4. And so there's no surprise why the industry has such challenges in terms of providing new housing at a price point that buyers in Salem can afford. Because we know what the incomes are in Salem, we know what people can afford. It's really, really difficult to meet that price point here in town. It's been a tremendous challenge, and it's not unique. It's not. I don't think it's a surprise to any of you. So what's happened is we have seen a much greater emphasis, I think, on multifamily construction in recent years. And so as it's gotten tougher for folks to afford new homes, to afford existing homes for that matter, we've seen the new construction market be really strong on apartment construction. And so we've seen in Salem, it's kind of even bucked some of the national trends. It's down a little bit this year as some of the multifamily developers have struggled with financing, but still it's remained very strong. And frankly, over the last few years, we've seen about 2/3 of our residential units built in Salem be multifamily. Only about 1/3 are single family. And that's a complete reversal from Salem's housing stock, that we've built over 150 years. Salem's housing stock is about 2/3 single family, 1/3 multifamily, but that's not what we're building right now. And it's changing the fabric of our community in terms of the housing prices and what it's forcing folks to build. It's also changing who is building and what they're building. And so I think that historically Salem's housing market has really been dominated by our smaller local builders. That is not the case anymore. By and large, it's the national production builders that have completely changed that market and taken it over, building over half of the new homes here in Salem. And we've seen that because they've been able to acquire those really big tracts of land in East Salem, whether it's the North Star project in Northeast or it's the East Park development in East Salem. That land is flat. It is much cheaper to develop than land in South Salem or in West Salem. And so they've been able to build a new home at a price point that frankly the rest of the market can't meet. So you're selling these homes. You can buy a home in East Salem from D.R. Horton for maybe $400,000 to $450,000. What we're finding is that's changing as well, because they're soon going to be out of land there at East Park, and so the national builders are starting to look elsewhere in town, and they're acquiring other land and moving into price points that traditionally have been the realm of our local builders. And so you look, for example, Richmond American Homes has got the reserve at Battle Creek off Battle Creek Road. They're in the mid-600s. Richmond American is also down in Sorrento Estates in South Salem. They start in the mid-700s. And so we have D.R. Horton also buying out in Sorrento Estates, and I'm sure based on the price point they're going to pay for those lots, they're not going to be building that same price point that they've been building in East Salem. So we're seeing the national builders now starting to build at a different price point in the last year and make plans to build at a different price point than they have been. And so certainly that's a threat to the local builders. But from a kind of a broader picture, regardless of what we think of the national builders, they serve that price point in the market that's really, really difficult for even our local builders to do. And I think it's not good for Salem when we're out of that flatland in East and we haven't got builders of any type able to do new construction and that $450,000 price point. I think that's what we're going to see in the near future as we're out of that land and the folks have to move into South Salem and West Salem where costs are higher. What we are seeing is a greater emphasis on middle housing, and I think this industry is really familiar with middle housing, right? It's the stuff that was permitted by the state, putting duplexes or triplexes or quads or cottage clusters on lots that historically have been limited only to single family homes. So we're seeing a lot more activity on the middle housing side. And in the last 10 months, I think, for the end of October, we've built 70 middle housing units in Salem. That's equivalent to about 1/3 of the single family units that we built. and it's pretty diverse. I mean, it's duplexes, it's triplexes, it's quads, it's cottage clusters. But almost all of that right now has been rental investment properties. Almost all of it. I think there's an opportunity here though, and especially for this audience, you guys are in the business of selling homes, not renting them. You can go through the middle housing land division process in Oregon. And so just because it's a duplex or a triplex or a quadplex, you can actually go through a process where those individual units can be sold. It's a little more complicated, it's a little more complex, it's a little more expensive, and I think that's what's deterring people from going through that process. You gotta figure it's gonna add maybe $10,000 to $15,000 per unit, you know, because you've gotta divide the land through the city, you've gotta ensure you've got utilities that go to each unit, you've gotta get easements in place for the parking, for the driveway, for the access, for the shared building elements and all of that. There's a process, but at the same time, I think it's an opportunity. And so as you are looking at parcels that come up for sale, especially if you're working with a smaller builder, that may be something to explore, because I really think it's an underserved segment of the market that we're gonna need more of if we're gonna have home ownership opportunities at a price point that we can't serve elsewhere. So certainly keep that in mind. Let's see, let's talk about subdivision applications that we're seeing coming up. The industry's been slow, so we haven't seen that much going on, but there's still some activity. Just down the road from here, you go down Sunnyside. You know where Wind River Homes built Sabre Ridge, about a mile south of here on Sunnyside? So a new application just came in the last 2 or 3 months called Kane's Place. It's a subdivision of about 240 lots, and that's gonna basically extend Sabre Ridge all the way over to the freeway. And that's being developed by a developer out of Bend, Larry Kine, I think is the name. Don't know exactly what they're putting in there. It's still new. We do know though that that developer has done a lot of affordable housing projects around the state and has tapped into a lot of the state monies they've made available for affordable housing. So I don't know if that's what's gonna happen there, but I won't be surprised. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what's gonna take place there at Kane's Place. Another project that's underway is the Headwaters subdivision right there on Battle Creek and Landau. So if you know where Pringle Elementary School is, directly south and southeast of Pringle Elementary, the old Mahonia Nursery, John Miller is developing that 220 lot subdivision, and that's going entirely to Banner Homes, which is a local builder, Steve Hurley. And so they're moving dirt out there already if you've driven by. And Steve expects to be out of the ground going vertical with construction second quarter of next year. Those should be 1,600 to 2,400 square foot homes starting in the 600s. And so given all the activity taking place in recent years with the big national builders, really encouraging to see a big project going to one of our local builders. So it's somewhat unique. Sorrento Estates is a newer project that just got platted here in the last 3 weeks. It is out there adjacent to just south of Bella Cresta and Verona Heights. It is just north of Mildred Lane, where they kind of push Mildred Lane from Liberty over to Skyline. It kind of borders that. It's 40-something lots. There is going to be some custom homes in there. Folkshaw Homes has bought some lots. Banner Homes has a few lots. In fact, the Home Builders Association's bought a lot for our project house next year. But a number of those lots are going to D.R. Horton. And it's interesting, when I talked to the developer of that project, which was Sursa Pacific National, he tried to sell many of those lots to our local builders, but what we're finding is, frankly, as those national builders have come in and kind of squeezed the local builders aside, there are fewer and fewer of our local builders that either have the access to capital or the risk tolerance willing to take down a large number of lots nowadays. And so even though they were available, most of those have gone to D.R. Horton, and we'll see them at a different price point that they have been in the past. Big project coming up that you may be aware of is the Vantage Hills subdivision, and that is on the old Fairview training site. That's Holt Homes, which is a large regional developer. They're merging with Richmond American, a national builder. 550 lots there, right along Pringle and Battle Creek, where they come together just north of Reed. It's just south of where Eric where Olson Communities has built their Fairview Addition project. That they're moving dirt on. I expect they'll be out of the ground here with homes in the next year or so. So that really is kind of the bigger housing projects that we're seeing coming along right now. Not all of them, but the bigger ones. Just want to touch on some of the regulatory issues that are kind of holding us back and a challenge right now. We're going to see a new building code or an update in the building code next year. Oregon's on a 3-year code cycle as we update the code, and we have seen that building code every 3 years just tighten screws and tighten the screws on energy efficiency. And that in large part goes back to our prior governor, Governor Brown's executive order, which requires that new construction, both residential and commercial, be 60% more energy efficient, use 60% less energy by the year 2030 than we did in 2006. And so every code cycle, we see more and more costs. We're going to see that next year as well. So we're thinking it's probably going to add $5,000 to $10,000 in cost to the construction of a home once that code goes into effect in October. As an industry, we're fighting to try and carve out small homes. And so we'd like to have them be as big as we can. Right now, we're trying to get them at least to 1,500 square feet so that at least the homes that are 1,500 square feet won't have to go beyond the current code, because that will at least keep the pricing down for those smaller homes. Remains to be seen if we'll be able to accomplish that. Working with the city of Salem right now on a couple of code improvement processes. I'm not sure how much difference it'll make, but incremental changes are good. And so we're going to see some changes perhaps in the zoning code going to council here after the start of the year. Everything from lot sizes and depths, kind of the area on a lot that you can put an ADU, some changes around mixed use, flag lot standards, all of that. So maybe even a little more flexibility with the city's pretty strict tree preservation codes, which will be helpful. Nothing major, but all of that will be an incremental change. City's going to be looking at system development charges next year, which is always a concern for me because I have yet to be involved with a city that changes its SDCs where they don't go up. It's just a law of physics. So really concerned about that because SDCs are a big cost driver in new construction. There's a new law that takes effect January 1st that really affects contractors, but at the same time, I think about this room and it may affect some of you. How many of you have an ownership interest in commercial property or rental properties? So a number of you. So there's a new law going into effect January 1st that makes general contractors and property owners responsible for the wages of subcontractors that work on those properties if the subcontractor doesn't pay their employees. How many of you are in a position to know if the subcontractors that work on your sites pay their employees? None of you. Maybe even a builder. A builder has no idea. You could pay your subcontractor, you could pay your general contractor. You have no idea. You have no way of knowing if they paid their employees. But now those employees will have up to 2 years after working on your job to come back and file a claim against you if they're unpaid. And the great thing is it's not just paying the wages, but it's also the penalties and the fines that go along with that as well, even though you had nothing to do with the non-payment. So welcome to doing business in the state of Oregon. And then finally, we're keeping a really close eye on the floodplain regulations. And I think you're probably familiar with this, but there was a lawsuit a few years ago that surrounded the National Flood Insurance Program and the Endangered Species Act. And the long and short of that is basically cities that want to remain in the National Flood Insurance Program, and of course every city does because having flood insurance is really important for your buyers in many cases. In order to keep offering flood insurance in the communities are going to have to dramatically increase floodplain protections. And so we're going to see these buffers along streams and waterways. We're going to see much greater floodplain development restrictions. They've just kind of wrapped up their draft environmental impact statement in October, waiting for the final rules. But even cities right now are having to do these interim standards, kind of tightening the screws on floodplain development. And so in the next 18 to 24 months, I expect the permanent rules to be in place, and it's going to have a big, big impact on land availability, where we can develop and what we can develop. So certainly something to keep an eye on. So guys, I'm going to stick around afterwards. If you have any questions, come catch me. Appreciate the opportunity to be here, and thanks so much.